The woman at the cash register squinted at my ID and then at me. "What's your birthday?" She seemed curious to see how I'd react. A card declaring you had to have been born 1994 or earlier hung in the backdrop behind her. 10/16/86, October 16th, 1986. I said it 2 ways to make it seem like I'd owned it and had it my whole life. "Yeah, we can't accept this. You need to have a Massachusetts state ID." Because finding out my birthday would have changed what state the ID was from. What she didn't say that I heard more often from people is, "You look like you're 15. You sure this is you?" I didn't bother protesting or making a scene. There's no sense in turning suspicion about a fake ID into a complaint about an angry black man with a fake ID. I went back to waiting for the bus outside. It was 2007 when I went from passing as a 21-year-old woman to a 12-year-old boy. I kickstarted my transition with the most drastic change I could manage for the least money possible. I cut off my dreads. I walked around campus for weeks with what is probably, and hopefully, the worst haircut I'd ever have in my life, but it got attention that things were going to be changing around here. I had 6 months to start living and passing as a man in order to start hormone replacement therapy. Long story short, my therapist decided that I wasn't ready to start taking testosterone. In hindsight, she might have been right. I had been diagnosed with chronic depression when I was in high school. I had had a pretty unsuccessful treatment with Prozac earlier that year. The previous year, I made kind of a silent attempt at offing myself, and I was supposed to be starting a new antidepressant later that winter. So stability probably wasn't really something that I could offer myself at that time. But it was her assessment that I should be impressed or grateful that I had even gotten as far as I did that really got under my skin. I had a lot of goals for myself, I still do. And I just wasn't interested in this idea that even though I couldn't stand to be in my body, I should just be fine with it and keep moving. So I got a new therapist, and I started taking testosterone unsupervised, which is something that I would not recommend. In a few short months after starting taking T, I'd acquired a new secondhand wardrobe to fit my now 5 inches larger waistband. On the plus side, though, I'd started getting SIR'd more often, which is when people say things like, "What can I get you, sir?" It's a big benchmark or milestone in a transition process. Shortly after starting testosterone, I'd started taking Wellbutrin for my depression, and this combination was a really bad idea. Wellbutrin is sometimes referred to as a poor man's cocaine. It keeps norepinephrine and dopamine available longer to stimulate receptors in your brain, so it basically just makes you feel like you're winning at life all the time, unless you're like me, in which case at the end of the day you crash really hard as well. So now my very cocky, overconfident, testosterone, Wellbutrin raging self was attracting attention from all different kinds of places than in the past. So not like the quiet, angsty, punk emo kids that I had hung out with my whole life, but now competitive and cocky folks who were ready to get in a fight just as easily as I sometimes was. A funny thing about going through puberty for a second time is that it sucks in almost exactly the same ways as it did the first time. And one of those is like not really knowing how to manage your emotions. I had already been a person who would do things like punch walls when I would get angry. And now, instead of just hurting myself when I punched walls, I would hurt myself. And now that I was stronger, maybe like dent the wall, or maybe if it was a really shitty wall, just like leave a hole in it. And then the house manager of my frat would come after me to like repair it, because now that I was a man, I should know how to fix things, right? I didn't, not at all. Another thing about this, though, was that before it was like maybe something like a weird, raging lesbian meme that was kind of funny, maybe something that would go on Snapchat if smartphones existed in 2007. But after transitioning, it was more like, hey, look, there's an angry black man. Somebody should like put him away or like get away from him. And not really something that you make a joke about. Those first couple of months was when I got some of the most important lessons about masculinity. One was, know what you want, and then act like you not only deserve it, but already have it. and then take it. I learned this one while trying to get into my first men's-only gay bar. I was so nervous that the F next to sex on my ID was going to give me away before I even got through the door that I felt like I was going to throw up just right away. I don't believe that this rule should apply all of the time, but if you want to butch up really quickly, a dose of that one will really help you out. Rule number 2, accept your punishment. Another version of this rule might be a man about it. In the summer before finishing up college, one night on the front lawn of my frat, I found myself put in a headlock by an older man who worked on campus. If this had been literally anybody else, I would have been outraged and up in arms about this. I would have been trying to get them to file a complaint with the college. But instead, I walked away remembering very little, except that I wasn't interested in adding any weight to his assertion that I was a tranny fag who should leave being a man to people who were born that way. I knew what he was trying to say, that your sex assignment at birth and gender always equal each other, and that's a binary choice. And the best argument for me at that time seemed to be to suck it up, accept it, and to just prove him wrong. 12 years later, I don't get carded much or eyed past the requisite check for birth year. I don't punch walls or start fights. Most folks I know can't even imagine me raising my voice. I don't try to be too presumptuous, and I try to reject the idea that anyone has the right or wisdom to decide what kind of punishment I deserve, never mind to give it to me. For me, this idea of what a man is a package of stories, ideas, misconceptions, lies, and fantasies. Masculinity is more a socially designed pattern than something absolute, real, or unique. I do believe that how masculinity is measured and defined can be changed by how people identify and claim their own masculinities and like the whole spectrum of masculinities. These false images put out from society have come undone for me only by meeting and spending time with men who live quietly and responsibly, leading wholly unheroic lives in the public eye, but being champions in their own self-identity by having the courage to seek out their most authentic selves. This is the kind of man I hope to be.